Hi, welcome. This is a video for the overview module of Linguistics 101. In this video we're going to look at the concept of grammar in linguistics and some broad ideas that linguists have discovered that apply to all grammars. So we talk about the patterns of language often enough in linguistics, it's kind of the point, that we have a single simple term for it, and that term is grammar. Grammar to a linguist is the patterns of language. Now, this is a bit broader than what most people mean by grammar. In other contexts, grammar might just mean the way that you string words together, syntax, or the way that you add prefixes and suffixes to words, that's morphology. But to linguists, all the patterns are important. The patterns of pronunciation, the patterns of meaning, of social patterns, all of these are important to the grammar. Now, there's a lot of different areas, but in this course, as we learned in the previous video, we're going to focus on 5 different areas of the grammar. The semantics, the phonetics, the phonology, the morphology, and the syntax, right? Now, having sort of established the general idea of a grammar, let's get into some actual content. So we're actually, rather than just sort of setting the scene, we're going to say something about language. So we're going to cover 5 different facts about the grammars of the world's languages. Okay? And this isn't exhaustive, but it's a good way to set things up for going forward. So the first one is a concept called generality. And this is just the observation that every language has a grammar. And it might seem obvious, it should seem obvious if you have any idea of, like a language has structure. Without structure, I could say something, but you wouldn't have any way of interpreting the sounds that I make or the movements that I make as meaning anything, because you wouldn't have a structure to fit them into. But there have been times in history when people say that language doesn't have much structure to it, or that language is gibberish. Possibly not thinking about the language very carefully. But anyway, it's good to remind ourselves that all languages have structure, so that's generality. Another fact that again is obvious on reflection, but it's an important fact about languages, so we will put a name to it, and that name is parity, P-A-R-I-T-Y, as opposed to parody, P-A-R-O-D-Y, which is a whole other thing. Parity is the concept of things being on par, and in this sense it's languages. So any language that is spoken by a community, used, transmitted to the next generation, is a useful language, is a good tool for communication. If it weren't, they would do something else. They would either find another language, or they would adapt that language to be useful, fully useful for communication. And we see both of these things happening in the history of languages. The idea here is just to remind ourselves again that languages are good at helping us communicate things. Just because I can't communicate anything particularly useful in Arabic, it's not the fault of Arabic, it's the fact that I don't speak Arabic, right? Languages, in their own right, are good tools of communication, and it's good to remember that when we get frustrated, either as linguists or as learners of the language or whatever. That's parity. So the third fact, and this gets into some more substance, is inaccessibility. This concept refers to the fact that when I'm using a language, I'm not constantly dredging into consciousness all of the different bits of the grammar, all the different patterns, and then consciously deploying them. I think of an idea, and I sort of let the machinery work automatically, and it generates the language. So inaccessibility is the fact that I cannot consciously access the grammatical patterns that I'm using. Closely related to that is the concept, this isn't one of the facts about grammar, it's just a nice term to know, the concept of linguistic competence, which is our ability to just do language without thinking about it. You can see that it's sort of, they're really closely welded together like two sides of a coin. Inaccessibility refers to the fact that it's not conscious, and linguistic competence refers to the fact that we're good at it anyway. The next aspect of grammar that we're going to look at and label is mutability. Now, there's a lot of work out there in popularizing linguistics and other things that observes that languages change. They're kind of like biological organisms in that way. They change over time, they mutate, they become new languages. Sometimes they split and produce multiple languages from a single descendant. Lots of interesting parallels there. But the idea is languages change, and that's just a fact. Languages are a social phenomenon. They arise through social interactions between human beings, and as we interact socially, we change things. Language is no exception. So languages change, and you can notice with a lot of these, especially the generality and parity, but even the inaccessibility and this mutability, we're reminding ourselves that linguists are approaching language descriptively. We're not bemoaning the fact that languages change or the fact that nobody's conscious of the rules that they're using. We're just saying, hey, there's something that happens. Let's describe it, right? Descriptive. Right, languages change. And it's not just the words change or the pronunciations change or this. Everything about a language can change, right? How you encode tenses can change, how you build words, what words you have, what sounds you have to build words out of, all of these things, the way that you divide meaning up in the world into words and assign it to affixes and all these things, it can all change. Languages change. Some bits change faster than others, but it all changes. Right. And the fifth main point about grammars that is worth noting and is the subject of a fair amount of investigative effort over time by linguists is universality. There are language universals, specific nuggets of facts about language, and specific facts about language that, although they may not have had to be in a sort of abstract conceptual sense, they seem to be true about all languages, all human languages, wherever. And these universals can fall into any of our little areas of investigation. Semantically, all languages seem to use metaphor as a method of generating new meanings. Phonetics, if you have fricatives in your language, you'll also have stops. Some of these terms will make no sense right now because we haven't hit that part of the course yet, but it'll make sense eventually. If you have fricatives, then you will also have stops. In phonology, the sonority hierarchy governs syllable structure in all languages. It's going to make more sense, of course, when we get to phonology. Morphologically, derivational processes almost universally apply before inflectional processes. That's a general tendency across languages. Syntax, all languages have nouns and verbs. Some of these facts seem kind of trivial or basic. Some of them are a bit more nuanced or specific. Some people have even said that's suspiciously specific, almost as if we have some constraint programmed into our brains to force us to do this, even though the general idea of a language, we can imagine it working a bunch of different ways, but somehow as humans we're forced to do it this way. That's an area of lively debate over the years, and I don't believe the debate has really fizzled out yet. I have my preferences, but that's not the subject of this course. Notice also that some of these universals are absolutes, like all languages have nouns and verbs, and some are implications, if A then B. If a language has fricatives, then it also has stops, right? So it doesn't say that any language has to have fricatives or any language even has to have stops. But just an implication. If this is happening, then that's also going to be happening in the language. We'll encounter a few of these specific language universals over the course of the term, and maybe learn what some of these terms that I'm throwing at you mean. So as you work through the 5 modules of this course, it'll be useful to keep in mind the idea of grammar, as linguists use it, right? The idea of patterns in language, and to remember these 5 key properties of grammars that we've identified. Generality, all languages have a grammar. Parity, all languages are adequate to the job of communication. Inaccessibility, speakers don't consciously use and deploy the rules of the grammar that they're using. Mutability, languages change. And universality, the existence of these particular nuggets of fact that seem to be universal across human languages. Now, I don't have a go away and do this kind of exercise at the end of this video. Do check out the exercises on eClass, and yeah, I guess the next thing is going to be the quiz. So try out the practice quiz and be ready for the graded quiz at the end of the week. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.